back to Love Your Food. This week we have a recipe that you might be familiar with if you've ever been to a dim sum restaurant. These are turnip cakes. It is Chinese food, as I said, frequently you spot at dim sum restaurants, usually made with turnip and radish, and we're making them today with watermelon radish, which is sort of halfway between a turnip and a radish. Here's our ingredients. So we're starting with these great watermelon radishes, a little bit of cornstarch, some sugar, and some salt. We're going to be using some shiitake mushrooms, some green onion, a little bit of water that we're going to be boiling everything in, some XO sauce in place of the dried shrimp, some bacon, and some rice flour. So it's a few ingredients that you don't normally find, but you can pretty easily find them in any kind of ethnic aisle at a grocery store. We're going to start with our watermelon radishes. So the first things first, we are going to peel these. The outside of these is quite fibrous and tough, so we're going to get rid of that first. Now, you can't quite see the amazing color of the inside of these. We're going to leave a little bit of that rind on there. But when we go to grate them, which is the next thing we're going to do, you'll definitely be able to see some of that amazing color come out. So there you go, you see that really bright, just bright magenta red on the inside of these amazing watermelon radishes, which gives the color to this particular recipe that we're doing, which is sort of a non-traditional ingredient for this, but did turn out extremely well. So there we go, we've grated all of our radishes. And our next step is going to be, we need to boil these for a little while. So we're going to put these into a pot. And we do want to cook these for a while. They're quite, they are quite fibrous. They're like a turnip in their texture. So we do need to cook these down a little bit. We're going to make them a little softer. We're just going to cook them until they've relaxed a little bit and wilted somewhat. So we're just going to use that water. You can see they're not covered, so largely this is going to be steaming, honestly. It's going to be partially boiled and partially steamed. And don't worry, most of that color will stay. While that's starting, we're going to get our mushrooms ready. So shiitake mushrooms, the stems, even on these little baby ones, do tend to be kind of woody. So if you just give them a little twist, the woody stems will come off, and we're just going to pile these up and cut them super, super thin. Now this will give us sort of a nice texture in the final product, and you'll be able to see individual pieces of the mushroom. Now if you ever had this recipe at a Chinese dim sum place, you'll probably have noticed that they have that sort of spam-like meat mixed in frequently. We're going to use bacon just because this is what we have on hand and it's a little easier to work with. We're just going to cut this into lardons. So the bacon's going to hit the pan. And we're just going to let that cook for a little while. We're going to let it get a little bit of color and let some of that fat render out. So you want to make sure your pan is good and hot while this is starting. And just spread it around so that it's all getting good contact with the heat. And while that's starting to come up to temperature, we are going to get rid of, we're going to get one of our green onions ready. So we have 2 green onions in this recipe. One of them is going to get cooked with the mushrooms, and the other is going to be mostly garnish at the very, very end. So we're just going to cut this into pretty thin slices. While while the bacon is rendering and cooking, we're just going to check on this, give it a good stir. You want to make sure that everything's moving around. You get some of the stuff from the bottom onto the top. You want to make sure you're not getting a lot of color or anything on any of the turnip, and just make sure that it's all getting good contact with the heat. So you can see here our bacon has been cooking for a little while. It's starting to get a little bit of color. A lot of fat has rendered out, which is perfect because what we're going to do with that is use it to line the glass sort of trays that we're going to be putting the final turnip cakes into. Now, these are going to be steamed eventually. You want to get any little bits of bacon out that you end up in there. These are going to be steamed, but we do want to make sure that they are well greased before we get started. So once we've removed some of that grease, we are adding our mushrooms, and we are adding the green onions as well. So the mushrooms get a good stir first. Now this is going to, as mushrooms tend to do, soak up a lot of that oil. So a lot of that bacon flavor is just going to soak right into those shiitake mushrooms. And then once they've sort of shrunk a little bit, they've got a little bit of color, we're going to add the XO sauce. Now this is a pretty spicy sauce that has some dried seafood in it as well. It's really interesting flavor. It's got a lot going on, and really great color, which you're going to see in just a second here. So we've added our green onions. And we're just going to give that all a good stir. And you can see this great color, the bright green of those green onions, and that sort of reddish color from the XO sauce really makes a very visually appealing look here. Speaking of visually appealing, this is the amazing color that is still in these watermelon radishes. You can see a lot of it in the water, which we are going to use. But the next thing we want to do is drain the turnip, or in this case watermelon radish, as much as we can. So we're using a slotted spoon. We're going to try and drain as much of this liquid out as we can, and we want to let this cool just a little bit before we do our next steps. So from here we're going to take, we need a cup of the liquid from the boiling that we've done. If you don't quite have a cup, just top it off with water, and that is perfectly fine. And then we're going to add this back in. And then we're going to add our other ingredients. So here comes the cornstarch, and we're going to give that a good mix until we get a bit of a slurry going on. So try and mix that in until it's pretty smooth. You don't want any lumps of this in there. Here comes the salt and the sugar. And then all of the rice flour as well. So this is all going in at the same time. And give this a good stir. You want to be a little bit gentle so that it doesn't billow up. You don't want little clouds of rice flour or anything. And just mix it all until it's all together like this. And you do want to let this cool for quite some time. Once it's all mixed, we are going to add in the veggies. So here's the mushrooms, the green onions, the XO sauce. All of that's coming together here with the bacon as well. And that will have a little bit of oil with it as well, which you do need in this recipe. So that bacon grease is going to be included in there, along with the ones, the portion that we've added to the bowls that we're going to be using. So give it a good mix, and then let this cool and sort of come together. We're going to add a little bit of white pepper. And you don't want to overdo it with the white pepper. It's very easy to go too far with that. It's a very rich, earthy aroma, and a little bit goes a long way with the white pepper. So we're just going to give that a little stir, make sure it's all well combined, and set that aside for about half an hour until it's cooled quite a lot. And you can see it's changed quite a bit in texture now that it's cooled. It is a lot less soupy. It has become more like a batter. The starches, the rice flour and the cornstarch have come together and sort of thickened up the liquid that was in there. And here are our greased pans. We're going to put the batter into those. Now we want to try and divide it up as evenly as we can, so 1 scoop for each. And then you do want to make sure that it's all well spread out. So you want to get it into the corners. You want to make sure that there's not big portions of it that are just the liquid. So just make sure it gets into all the corners, and it's this really amazing pink color at this point. But as it cooks, it's going to darken back into that sort of reddish color. Now we've sort of improvised a steamer here in a stock pot with something in the bottom and some boiling water. So we're just going to pop these into the stock pot. We don't have a regular steamer, so we're just using this to improvise. We're going to put the lid on and let that steam for almost an hour, actually. Now once it's done, we are going to pull that out. This has been going for about 50 minutes. And you do want to let this cool a little bit before you handle it. So it is fully set. You can see it's no longer soupy or like a batter anymore. It's still quite sticky, but it does just pop out of there, out of your greased pan. And from here we just want to cut it, and this is the last sort of step in this process. So with a wet knife, because it is, as I said, quite sticky, so you want to make sure your knife is wet, you're going to cut this into portions, whatever portions you prefer. You can see it is quite sticky indeed. And we're just going to put this into a pan with some oil. So we have just some neutral cooking oil, and we're just going to get this pan really good and hot. And this is the last stage. This is the last thing they usually do at a dim sum restaurant to get that sort of nice brown crust on the outside of the turnip cakes, which are usually white. So these ones are this interesting pink color. Might be a good Valentine's Day recipe. So we're going to get that into our nice hot pan with the oil and give it a good sear on one side. And then once you've got some good color on one side, you're going to flip these over. The color is really interesting. It does make it look a little bit like Spam all the way through. And then while that's cooking on the other side, we're going to get the other green onion ready. So again, we're just going to chop this. This is going to be a garnish for the outside. So these have been cooking on the other side for a little while, so they have a really good sear on that side as well. You can see there, it's got some great color. Now they don't get particularly crispy, but they do get this really nice sort of seared crust on the outside. So we're just going to put these aside onto a plate. And you can serve these individually. You can serve however you like. It makes a great side dish. We're going to garnish generously with those green onions. And then we're going to top it with just a little bit of nice, rich, dark soy sauce. And just a tiny, tiny bit of sesame oil, which adds a very interesting, really rich aroma. And just a little tiny bit, because again, with soy sauce, a little bit, with sesame oil, a little bit goes a long, long way. Now, unfortunately, this is not the type of recipe that you can taste and test as you're cooking it. It all has to go through all of the processes before you can eat it, but now's the time. So now's a great time to taste it and adjust the seasoning on the outside. If it needs any, a little bit more soy sauce, a little bit more sesame oil, and that's it. That's the whole thing. So this is a little bit of a non-traditional take on these. It comes out with this fantastic color. They really are delicious. They're really, really fantastic, and I hope you will give them a try. So if you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.